Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Ebro in the morning. You have Rosenberg, you have Laura Stiles, and on the phone, a lady I've revered and watched her videos online. And my mom put me on her a while ago. Her name is Jane Elliott. Give it up for Jane Elliott on the show. Just last week, we had some tragedies, and, I speak about racism in this country often. People don't like it, but it's very real and something we deal with. And Jane Elliott, last week, I decided to post one of your videos on my Instagram page, and it was one of your exercises. If you could tell the audience, what exactly do you do?
I do what Hitler did. I pick out a group of people on the basis of a physical characteristic over which they have no control. I separate a group on the basis of that characteristic. I treat the people that I call the good people the way we treat white folks, white colored groups in this country, and I treat the rest of them the way we treat the other colored groups in this country. I do it with children. I do it for a day. With adults, I do it for an hour and a half, and I get the same results. It's absolutely terrifying to watch so-called adult white males, blue-eyed white males, become 8-year-olds within 15 minutes, and with some it takes 5 minutes.
And basically what you're doing is giving people a real-life experience of what it feels like to be isolated because you don't have any control of your appearance.
It's worse than isolated. It is picked on the basis of somebody else's ignorance about that physical characteristic. You need to remember that racism isn't the result of skin color. Skin color is natural. Racism is the result of ignorant people who think that skin color is a predictor of intelligence and worth as a human being. That's the problem. It isn't color. I use eye color. And I can turn nice, blue-eyed white people, males or females, adults or children, into people who act the way we accuse people of color groups other than white and women of behaving in this country. And I can do it in 15 minutes flat.
And companies pay you.
Because I teach ignorance, which is what we do in the schools. You need to remember, we aren't practicing education in the schools. We're practicing and using indoctrination to create a citizenry that believes in the myth of race. We're very good at it, but it takes us 18 years to get it fully developed.
So, even though these people sign up to do this, they're aware of what they're doing. They still, it still happens. It still works, even though they know going in what could happen.
Sure, they when they come to the room, they don't know what's going to happen, but in 5 minutes they know what's going to happen. And first they're angry. It's like watching somebody go through the 5 stages of grief. First they deny that I could possibly be right. Then they get angry. Then they start to bargain. Then they start to get depressed. And then they finally just sit back and take it, because as a woman in Washington, D.C. said, I knew you were wrong. I knew I should stand up and say something. And then something told me they're going to do it to you anyway. You might as well just sit down and take it. And she said, crying, she said, that's what I did. I sat down and just took it.
And that's when they identify with the experience of being an ethnic minority in this country. We've been talking obviously a lot about so many different things since everything that happened last week. And one thing that we've noticed is that a lot of white people seem to really be struggling with the idea of Black Lives Matter, and they want to change it to a conversation about all lives matter. And as a white person myself, I get really frustrated being forced over and over again to try to explain to other white people why they shouldn't be offended by Black Lives Matter. How would you even approach a conversation like that?
What we're dealing with is institutional ignorance. We have taught people that only white people are fully human. We have taught the myth of race for so long that we have created a society worldwide in which only white people are seen as superior human beings. We don't even regard some of the rest of them as human, and so we treat them as less than human. Black lives matter because for 500 years in this country, they have not mattered. White lives have always mattered. There's a book out there that everyone should read. Oh, go to the library and get it, though. Don't add anything to this man's estate. But Ben Wattenberg wrote a book called The Birth Dearth. And he says the major problem, and he was an advisor to the President of the United States. He says the major problem confronting the United States today is there aren't enough white babies being born. If we don't do something about this and do it now, white people will be in a numerical minority, and we will no longer be a white man's land. He says there are 3 ways to solve this problem. Number 1, we could pay women to have babies as they have been doing in Western European nations for years. Then he says, unfortunately, and these are his words, not mine, unfortunately, we would have to pay women of all colors to have babies, so we don't want to do that. He says the second thing we could do is increase the number of legal immigrants allowed into this country every year. Then he says, unfortunately, the majority of those wanting to come to this country today are people of color, so we don't want to do that. Now, think what Donald Trump has said.
Wow.
He says the third thing we could do is remember that 60% of the fetuses that are aborted every year are white. If we could keep that 60% alive, that would solve our birth dearth. Now, do you hear this as a racist situation that he's creating here?
Yes.
I mean, yes.
Of course.
Blatant racism. Blatant racism. And now you look at the Right to Life movement, and all of a sudden you realize it is not about morality, it is not about religion. It is about something really immoral, which is increasing the number of white babies and letting that other 40% who are not white fetuses die.
Jane Elliott's her name. Jane, just for the audience, if they haven't had time or don't have time to go find you on the internet and watch your videos, you are a white woman?
Oh, yeah, I'm as white as you can be. You can't get much whiter than I am.
And where were you born?
I was born in a manger. No, I wasn't born in a manger, but pretty close. I was born on a farm in Riceville, Iowa, 4.5 miles from town, and the doctor couldn't go out because he was delivering twins someplace, so he sent his son out to deliver me.
And if you don't mind me asking, I'm just trying to provide context because, you know, people will, like you said, try to bargain and debate how relevant or how on point your articulation of this issue is. If you don't mind me asking, how long have you been teaching this and consulting with people and trying to help this awareness?
Only a short time, 48 years.
48 years in the United States of America, you've been having this conversation. Have you found...
48. I started the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. And he didn't die, he was assassinated. And I'm tired of hearing people say Martin Luther King Jr. died on April 4th, 1968. He did not die. Then he was assassinated that day. Anyway, go ahead.
And you started because you were aware of this issue or you noticed something was wrong with the assassination of Martin Luther King? What took you on this journey?
I had been aware of this situation for many years since my father said, never put a stone in another man's path. And then in the next sentence, he said, I don't want any picking anything among my grandchildren. So there it was. You know, parallel opinions. It was just unbelievable that my father could say a thing like that. I lived in Waterloo, Iowa for a number of years, and Waterloo was called Little Chicago because of the large black population. My husband managed a supermarket for the National Tea Food Company. I learned about blatant racism there. It was passive racism in Iowa. But when I got to Waterloo, I learned about active racism. And I learned that black lives don't matter except in a negative way.
And so what you're seeing today with the Black Lives Matter movement and police brutality, you know, my mother's a white woman, white Jewish woman. My father's a black man. So I was raised to kind of be aware of what our society was built on. Everything from the study of niggerology, which was a real thing in this country where they analyzed black people's skin and brain size, et cetera, and put out pamphlets about them being less than human, et cetera, to reinforce this race issue. And this was in the early turn of the 20th century. But you, Jane Elliott, how would you help someone wrap their brain around what's going on today and take steps for us to find real solutions?
Number one, I'd get a copy of the DVD, The Eye of the Storm, and I'd sit down and watch it with my children. Because it's a film made in my classroom when I separated my group 2 years after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, according to the color of their eyes, and I ran the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise on them. I want children to see that. I want adults to see that. I want adolescents to see that. I want everyone to see that and to realize that when it's over, white teachers invariably say, I think that's too young to do that exercise with those children. They're just too young. I got an email saying that this morning. If she feels that it's 9 years old, is too young to do that exercise based on eye color with white students, she must be absolutely infuriated by the fact that we start that exercise based on skin color prenatally with children in this country.
And how do you
When I confront her with that, she says, and I had this reaction to this response to that too many times. When I say that to people who say those children are too young, what about black children? Invariably, that woman says, and it's usually a white woman who says it, that's different. They're used to it. They can take it. Do you find that offensive?
Of course. Without question. Well, Miss Jane Elliott, I wanted to have you on today because I wanted people to hear your voice and hear your name. I think that we live in a time where, all voices need to be heard on this issue, and people need to be brave enough if we're going to save this country that we love and continue to prosper. We need to be brave enough to have this conversation because there is trauma, there is institutionalized racism. White supremacy in this country is something that has been taught for hundreds of years, and it's going to take us a long time to work through this issue.
But you see, it doesn't have to. It only took us 6 months to gear up to fight the Second World War. It only took 3 years to land on the moon after JFK said we were going to. It doesn't have to take that long. Please give me the chance to say this to folks. You need to read Frederick Douglass' statement when you're talking about Black Lives Matter. He said, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. People have to realize that Frederick Douglass predicted what is happening in this country, and he predicted it in about 1857. It's time to get over it, people. This is ignorance. People will say, well, we're born that way. Racism is innate. No, it is not. It's a learned response. Nobody is born a racist. You have to be trained to be a racist, and it takes several years to get that done. Or just one ugly remark from a grandfather that you adore. And you can become racist in 5 minutes flat.
Whew. That's good stuff. She's so right. Wow.
So right.
Jane, thank you for your time. Or Miss Jane Elliott, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for giving me time.
And we will be in touch as these issues continue to come up because I think we'll need to do a repetitive exercise of having this conversation over and over and over and over again until we start to really make some progress.
Listen, we know that you have to advertise a product 4 times. A person has to see that advertisement 4 times before they'll buy the product. You're going to have to do this over and over and over, and you know it, because it's going to take a long time for white folks to buy the product that is their own ignorance, and to own it, and then to get rid of it.
Jane Elliott, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.